It started as a simple yes or no question. Should Prince Harry and Meghan return to the UK? That's it. That's all the producers thought they were asking. But within minutes, what was supposed to be a straightforward debate spiraled into something far bigger, far more layered, and honestly far more revealing than anyone on that panel probably expected.
In the meantime, would you welcome Harry and Meghan back to the UK? I think, Narinder, you'd like them back?
I think the royal family, I think their future really depends on Harry and Meghan, because I think they're so relevant. They appeal to, the younger generation. They work extremely hard. And I think they show, an inclusive royal family, a progressive royal family. Do I think they should come back? Absolutely not. As much as I'd love William and Harry to make up, look, if the Gallaghers can make up, so can William and Harry. And I think that any family, I hate when there's family rows and dramas, my family do, make up. I do think they need to make up, but I don't think this country is a safe place for Meghan or Harry. I think the racism that Meghan receives is despicable. And I think Harry's quite right to keep his family and his children safe from the despicable hate.
Claudia, will they come back?
Well, why shouldn't he? Will it be interrupted while I can say what I want to?
Go ahead, David. We'll see how you go.
Right. Well, why shouldn't he come back? We've got to put up with Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Plus, the thing is about when Harry comes back, his dad wants to make his peace with him for what he got up to with Camilla while his mother was looking after those two.
Yep, I hear what you're saying.
Plus, of course, if he does come over, he bumps into second-hand roads, doesn't he, where his mother should be?
Yeah.
He does what? Sorry, Beth, what was that? He bumps... I missed.
David, did you say that he's doing his mum's, he's carrying on his mum's
work?
Oh,
I see. OK.
Yes,
thanks,
Diana's
David.
work.
Thank you. Carolyn, Cornwall, hi.
Hi.
What do you think? Should they come back?
Yes, I do.
Go on, to carry the load.
Pardon?
To carry the load.
I don't know what you mean by that.
What I mean is to do some of the royal duties that aren't being done by the many people we listed earlier.
Yes. If he could, yes. I don't expect that he will do, but the thing is, if we can forgive Harry, why can't we forgive Charles?
Well, I mean,
Charles for what? Because I understand what you're saying. Harry seems to get a lot of blame.
Betraying Diana.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had to marry Diana. He didn't really want to. He was in love with somebody else who he couldn't marry. And he had to marry Diana so that he could give heirs to the throne.
Yeah.
And once he'd done that, he didn't... They had separate bedrooms, everything.
No, I hear you.
How he treated Diana.
Claudia, what do you think?
I think family is family, and it would be lovely if Harry could reconcile with his father and his brother if they're willing to forgive him for what he's done to them time and time again. But I think that's up to them to do privately. I think any reconciliation that they want is up to them. I mean, if that was me, if I was the head of the royal family, if I was Charles, I'd be looking at reconciling with an NDA in place so that he couldn't sell
with your own son. Stop it, Claudia.
He couldn't sell the details.
He's a terrible father. Charles has been a terrible father.
He hasn't been a terrible
He hasn't even
father.
seen his grandkids. I think he's met them once, if that. And he doesn't go over to America to see them. He can't even provide his own son with security.
Anything he says is going to make its way onto his own. Anything he says is going to make its way onto.
Just like they do about Harry. They feed stories. It was very naive, Claudia.
I think palm trees and podcast deals are perfect for them. Stay in Montecito. We don't need you here.
The royal family actually do need them, because actually they look dreadful as it is on the world stage.
Well, that is what
they
we're
look
discussing.
like they've thrown a woman of colour under the bus, and they're a very lazy family, and they need more representation. And actually they desperately need Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan don't need the royal family.
All right, Beth in London, what about that? The royal family need Harry and Meghan more than Harry and Meghan need the royal family.
Correct.
Did you say Beth? It's me now.
Well, yes, you're on, Beth. Far away.
Yeah. I will say that Harry has nothing to apologize for. When they were here, they were so popular. And then they came back from Australia, and everybody wanted Harry and Meghan. Nobody wanted William and Kate.
Yes.
And then the palace got worried, and then they started to make deal with the press. And one of them that come out and say that is Anna something, I can't remember. But she said basically make deal with the press. You can write what you want about Harry and Meghan and lay off William and Kate. They're only the good news.
Well,
But then
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Harry had done more work than William ever, and it's just the press who hasn't reported.
Claudia.
Let's welcome back to Royal Truth Desk. Today we're breaking down one of the most talked about royal call-in debates in recent memory, a conversation that somehow managed to touch on King Charles, Princess Diana's legacy, media bias, palace strategy, forgiveness, and the very future of the monarchy, all sparked by one deceptively simple question about whether the Sussexes should come home. If you're new to this channel, welcome. We specialise in breaking down these kinds of conversations, not to tell you what to think, but to actually dig into what's being said, who's saying it, and why it matters. So if that sounds like your kind of content, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because today's breakdown has a lot of ground to cover, and you won't want to miss where it ends up. Let's start with the question itself, because the way it was framed matters. Should Harry and Meghan return to the UK? On the surface, it sounds like a simple logistics question, a matter of geography and lifestyle. But almost immediately, callers made it clear that this question can't actually be answered without wading into everything underneath it. Security, family relationships, media trust, personal history. What began as a debate about a plane ticket turned into a debate about identity, belonging, and whether reconciliation is even possible after everything that's happened. One of the earliest and most passionate voices in the discussion came from a caller named Narinder, who didn't hedge for a second. Her argument was direct. Harry and Meghan have been judged far more harshly than the circumstances actually warrant, and a lot of the criticism aimed at them has less to do with what they've actually done, and more to do with how their story has been packaged and sold by certain sections of the press. Her point wasn't that Harry and Meghan are beyond criticism. It was that the criticism has often been disproportionate, relentless, and, in her view, occasionally unfair in ways that other royals simply haven't experienced for comparable choices. She spoke about the emotional toll of constant scrutiny and how a young family trying to protect their children shouldn't be treated as a scandal simply for wanting boundaries. It was a defence delivered with real conviction, and it set the tone for a debate that refused to stay tidy or one-sided. Then came David, and his comments took the conversation somewhere many people probably didn't expect, straight to King Charles. Rather than focusing purely on Harry's choices, David turned the spotlight onto the king himself, raising the uncomfortable but persistent question of whether Charles's own history, specifically his relationship with Princess Diana, plays a quiet but significant role in how this entire saga has unfolded. It's a comparison that's been made quietly for years, but rarely said out loud on live television. David's argument essentially was this: if the royal family expects the public to move on from old wounds when it comes to Diana, shouldn't that same grace be extended to Harry, a son who has spent much of his adult life publicly processing the loss of his mother, and the way the institution he was born into handled that period? It was a pointed comparison, and it reframed the entire debate. Suddenly, this wasn't just about whether Harry has been difficult. It became a question about whether the institution itself has ever been fully honest about its own role in decades of family pain. From there, the conversation took an even more provocative turn, with a caller named Carolyn, who posed what might be the most controversial question of the entire segment. Can King Charles, or the royal family more broadly, actually be forgiven for the past in the same way the public seems to expect Harry to forgive and move forward? It's a question that flips the usual script. So often, the public conversation centres on whether Harry should let go of grievances, whether he should stop talking about the past, whether he should simply accept his role and move on quietly. Carolyn's question turned that expectation back around, asking whether the same standard of forgiveness and grace that's demanded of Harry is ever demanded of the family or institution that, by many accounts, played a role in the pain he's carried since childhood. It's uncomfortable. It's not something that gets asked often in mainstream royal coverage. But it clearly struck a nerve, because it reframed forgiveness not as something owed by Harry, but as something that arguably needs to flow in both directions if genuine reconciliation is ever going to happen. Claudia's contribution shifted the tone slightly, moving from confrontation towards something more constructive. Her focus was on what reconciliation could actually look like in practice, not just whether it should happen, but what concrete steps might make it possible. She talked about the idea that reconciliation isn't a single dramatic moment, a tearful reunion, or a perfectly staged photo opportunity, but a slow, deliberate process built on small gestures of trust, rebuilt over time. Her perspective offered a kind of realism that's often missing from this conversation. It's easy to ask, will they ever make up? It's much harder to actually map out what making up would require. Private conversations without media leaks, security guarantees that don't require public negotiation, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness on all sides to let go of scoring points in the press. Claudia's argument suggested that reconciliation is possible, but only if everyone involved, the family and the institution around them, genuinely wants it more than they want to win the public narrative war. And then there was Beth, whose comments added a layer that a lot of royal commentary tends to avoid discussing directly. The idea that the palace itself has, at times, played an active role in shaping media narratives, rather than simply being a passive victim of tabloid attention. Beth's argument centred on the idea that palace communications teams have historically been strategic about which stories get amplified, which get quietly buried, and which family members receive protective coverage versus critical coverage. If that's true, even partially, it complicates the simple narrative that Harry and Meghan simply clashed with an uncontrollable press. It suggests something more deliberate, that public perception of the Sussexes may have been shaped, at least in part, by choices made much closer to the palace than most people assume. That's a significant claim, and it's one that's been floated by royal commentators for years without ever fully being resolved, but hearing it raised so directly in a live call-in format gave it a different kind of weight. Taken together, these 5 perspectives, Narinder's defence, David's comparison to Charles and Diana, Carolyn's question about forgiveness, Claudia's roadmap for reconciliation, and Beth's claims about media strategy, painted a picture of a public conversation that has clearly moved beyond simple headlines. This wasn't callers phoning in to simply say Harry is right or Harry is wrong. This was a group of ordinary people grappling with genuinely complicated questions about family, forgiveness, institutional accountability, and whether healing is even possible when so much of this story has played out under a media microscope. So what does this all tell us about where public opinion actually stands right now? For years, the loudest, most consistent narrative in British media coverage has painted Harry as the disruptor, the one who broke ranks, aired grievances, and disrupted the stability of an institution that values silence and discretion above almost everything else. But debates like this one suggest that narrative is no longer landing as cleanly as it once did. When callers start openly asking whether King Charles bears responsibility for repairing this relationship, when people start questioning whether the palace's media strategy has shaped public opinion more than genuine events have, that's a meaningful shift. It suggests a growing willingness among everyday people to hold the institution itself accountable, rather than placing the entire burden of reconciliation on Harry's shoulders alone. It's worth being honest, though. This debate didn't produce a consensus, and it certainly didn't settle anything. For every caller who defended Harry and Meghan, there were almost certainly others watching who felt just as strongly that Harry has brought much of this scrutiny on himself through his own choices to speak publicly about private family matters. That tension is part of what makes this conversation so persistent. There isn't a simple villain and hero here, no matter how badly some corners of the media, and honestly some corners of social media too, want to paint it that way. What this debate really exposed is how many different legitimate angles exist within this story, angles that rarely get equal airtime in a single conversation. Let's talk about security for a moment, because it's the practical hinge this entire debate keeps swinging back to. Even among callers who were sympathetic to reconciliation, there was broad agreement that any conversation about Harry and Meghan returning to the UK has to start with a clear, workable security arrangement. This isn't a small logistical detail, it's arguably the single biggest practical barrier standing between where things are now and any meaningful step toward reconciliation. Without addressing that, every other conversation about forgiveness, about rebuilding trust, about family dinners and quiet reconciliation is somewhat theoretical. Security isn't just a talking point for Harry, it's the foundation that everything else would need to be built on. And that brings us to the bigger picture question this whole debate seems to be circling. Has the media shaped this entire narrative more than most people realize? It's easy to consume years of headlines and assume you understand the full picture, that you've absorbed the facts and formed a reasonable opinion. But debates like this one are a useful reminder that headlines are, by nature, filtered, chosen, and framed by people with their own incentives, commercial and otherwise. When a caller like Beth raises the possibility that palace strategy has actively shaped which stories get told and how, it forces viewers to ask themselves an uncomfortable question. How much of what I believe about this entire saga is based on verified fact, and how much is based on years of accumulated framing that I never had reason to question? There's also something genuinely valuable in watching ordinary people wrestle with these questions live, without scripts, without talking points prepared by a publicist. Narinder's conviction, David's uncomfortable comparison, Carolyn's provocative question about mutual forgiveness, Claudia's practical roadmap, Beth's claims about media manipulation, none of it was polished. Some of it was messy, some of it contradicted other callers directly. But that messiness is exactly what made it feel real, and exactly why clips from this debate have spread so far beyond the original broadcast. People aren't just interested in whether Harry and Meghan come home. They're interested in what this entire saga says about family, about institutions, about whether forgiveness can ever really be a two-way street when one side holds so much more power over the public narrative than the other. So where does that leave us? Could reconciliation actually happen? Based on everything raised in this debate, it seems possible, but only if it's approached honestly, with security concerns addressed as a genuine first step rather than a talking point to dismiss, and with an acknowledgement from all sides, including the palace, that rebuilding trust requires more than waiting for the other person to apologize first. Should King Charles bear some responsibility here? That's clearly a question more and more people are willing to ask out loud, rather than assuming the burden sits entirely with Harry. And has the media shaped public perception more than people realise? If even a fraction of what Beth suggested holds up, then absolutely, and that alone should make anyone following this story a little more careful about which version of events they're accepting at face value. We want to hear from you on this one, because this is exactly the kind of conversation that deserves more voices, not fewer. Do you think Harry and Meghan should return to the UK if their security concerns were fully resolved? Do you think reconciliation should start with Harry, with King Charles, or does it genuinely need to come from both sides at once? And out of everything raised in this debate, whose point stuck with you the most? Narinder's defence, David's comparison to Charles and Diana, Carolyn's question about forgiveness, Claudia's roadmap for healing, or Beth's claims about palace strategy? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And these conversations genuinely shape what we cover next. If you enjoy this kind of balanced, in-depth analysis that goes beyond the surface-level headlines, do us a favour and hit that like button. It really does help this video reach more people who care about having an honest conversation. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Royal Truth Desk and turn on notifications, because we're committed to bringing you thoughtful breakdowns like this one, and you won't want to miss what we cover next. If you'd like to support the channel and help us keep producing content like this, consider leaving a super thanks. It genuinely means a great deal to us and helps this channel keep growing. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being part of the Royal Truth Desk community, and we'll see you in the next one.